tonight we are welcoming Billy Te Kahika. I believe I've said that correctly. I'll be corrected in a minute if I haven't. Who is an extraordinary freedom fighter from New Zealand. He is a very, very special man. And, you know, we keep saying that the world is going through a great awakening. And what Billy has done in New Zealand is quite extraordinary. He's a family man. He is a Christian, not a politician. He grew up on the poorer side of the tracks in South Auckland, New Zealand. His background includes marketing and sales, touring as a rock guitarist. He served time in the military. And he had his awakening. He even worked in the police force. He had his awakening some years back. And during the lockdown, has been propelled to form a movement of the people and for the people. And so began the New Zealand Public Party. Now, I'm going to bring Billy on screen, and I'm hoping that our technical division is going to work properly here. Billy, you are live at Camelot Castle. A very, very warm welcome to you. And what can I say? It is lovely to have you on. Could you, for our English viewers who perhaps are not familiar with New Zealand politics, could you explain how and why did you form the New Zealand Public Party? What is your story?
Sure, absolutely. Kia ora and greetings everyone from New Zealand, Aotearoa. It's great to be here. Thank you, John, for allowing me to come on this amazing platform. We were all very excited to be able to confirm this interview with you, brother. So thank you very much. Yes, that's a loaded question. As you say, the globe is going through an awakening to, I guess, the matrix system that we all live in, aren't we? You know, people that have not been awake for most of their lives have woken up to the fact that something doesn't smell quite right with the entire setup. I learned years ago that politics doesn't matter whether you vote red or you vote blue, because the devil behind the scene is the same devil. And I mean that metaphorically, but kind of real as well, because, you know, people get tied up in politics about left and right, but really behind the scenes, it's, you know, the same puppet masters are pulling both strings of the house. So, yeah, very much, as you say, a reluctant politician. I've been awake for a number of years studying geopolitics, everything, I guess, from the first Gulf War right through to 9/11 to where we are today, looking at the incredible fractional destruction of democracy using the threat of terrorism narrative to bring in these control mechanisms around the world, and including New Zealand. And now what we've seen here in New Zealand is that they've replaced terrorism with obviously climate change, and now it's the COVID-19 health response and crisis that we're going through here, which is really wrapped things up in New Zealand to a level of democracy destruction that we've never seen before. So how this movement formed is that about 10 weeks ago now, I was sitting in my beautiful farmhouse with my family in lockdown, and and I started to think, look, there's something wrong with the story around the COVID-19 crisis. And you mentioned that I served time in the New Zealand military. I was in the New Zealand Army, and I was very, very fortunate to complete the introductory courses to join the New Zealand Military Intelligence Corps. And what they did, that gave me a set of skills and disciplines to be able to assess information, to break it down, put it into different boxes, and then start mix and matching those boxes to evaluate and assess possible outcomes. So I applied those types of skills. It's a very disciplined way of assessing information. You can't just go off on a tangent. You can't set a pretense and try and build around that. You've got to actually let the facts and the evidences speak for themselves. So I applied that into having a good look at the crisis narrative. I got to say right up front, and I say this in my live presentations, that when the lockdown was announced and when the COVID-19 health crisis was announced, I was very, very concerned that that what we were going to see was a government-controlled release of a very intense, high lethality bioweapon. There's no doubt that this is a weaponized virus. In my view, there's absolutely no doubt of that. We've got all the information that proves that. But I was very concerned that it was going to be a very, very high lethality bioweapon that would be released on the public. I was very concerned for my family and my community. So we actually locked down about a week before the official lockdown date started in New Zealand. And we really, I mean, we live very rural. We're a self-contained little household. So, you know, we basically pulled the shutters down and closed the gates and you know, just really, I guess, insulated ourselves. But what happened was, after about a week of that, you kind of get thinking, because you're in lockdown mode, there's not much to do other than work on the farm and go for runs, which I was doing with my family. And I really started to look at the narrative and listen to it closely. And what I started to realize is that the so-called panel of experts from across the world, beginning from Dr. Neil Ferguson at Imperial College, over to Anthony Fauci, who's Trump's head medical professional in the United States response team, and the WHO, I started to see that the narrative was contradictory between the parties that were meant to be in complete sync with each other. You had the reluctance of the WHO to go into calling a global pandemic, and you had other parties within the medical world pushing the narrative that it was a global epidemic. WHO were reluctant to acknowledge that, and then Bill Gates gets involved. Next minute, hey presto, it's a global pandemic announced from the WHO. But I started to, you know, basically assess the narrative, and I started to find cracks in it, which started, you know, a whole course of action to evaluate the entire scenario. And what I always say in my presentations is that I started to put together what I call a chain of evidence map, and also a chain of actors and players involved in it. And that really started to open my eyes to the very real potential that what we're dealing with was completely manufactured, that the people pushing the narrative have conflicts of interest and wanted to see this narrative go global, basically introduce mandatory vaccinations by the very people that make the vaccinations, also develop the viruses, and have a great benefit to achieve out of seeing their commercial businesses thrive by rolling out a global vaccination program, which Bill Gates and Tony Fauci, of course, were very much a big part of that, and the WHO picked up on that as well. And really, the narratives really started coming apart very easily. It's almost like pulling the thread of a dress and watching it all come apart. And I really did go hard into it. And then, of course, you know, finding out that there was a narrative of dishonesty, really, that you could pull apart quite easily. And then, of course, our own Director General, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield here in New Zealand, as a former WHO doctor. He was, between 2010 and 2011, he was in the executive team of the infectious diseases unit at WHO. So he's very much pushing this doctrine, this ideology that was corrupt. And then, under the auspices of our Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, they started to really ramp up the attack on democracy in New Zealand, and also push this corrupt and faulty narrative. And one of the things I always point out to people is that there are hundreds of scientists around the world that are against this narrative and the overreach of government. They believe that the narrative is corrupt and dishonest based on faulty science. The Italians, of course, have come out and said that actually of the numbers that they announced of the COVID-19 deaths in Italy, only 13% of those were real once they drilled down into them. And then you have my personal hero, a gentleman called Dr. John Leonidas from Stanford University, who is a population health expert. He's a scientist, professor of epidemiology, and he came out very, very calmly and blew the whole thing apart with his team. And he just said, look, this is an overreach. There is no reason for the governments to be responding like this. It's not based on facts. It's not based on science. It's based on some sort of narrative that has another agenda attached to it. And of course, just the week before last, John came out and updated and reconfigured and announced the lethality of the virus. And now it's recognized without argument that the lethality of the COVID-19 virus is actually 0.004%, which is a lot different to Dr. Neil Ferguson's projection of 3 to 6%.
Well, I mean, this is shocking. I just want to welcome all the new people that have come on the feed. There was a slight problem initially. If you tried to share the feed in the first instance, I had the setting incorrectly. I'm probably worse technically than you are, Billy.
No, I don't know.
I'm a technical idiot, I'm afraid. But where we're strong on idiocy, we're also strong on freedom, you know. And the whole point about Camelot Castle is that we share ideas here. Now, what we are going to hear from this gentleman tonight, who is fast becoming the most respected and honest politician in New Zealand. And this is a country that has been, you know, the politics of New Zealand has been very interesting the past few years, because there has been a tremendous amount of corruption within New Zealand politics. And my brother is actually married to a Kiwi or to a New Zealand girl. And funnily enough, my great uncle was governor of New Zealand, Sir Frederick Mappin, and he actually built Government House, which is now, he built that actually to have as his private house, but it became Government House. And so the family, as a family, we do have a very strong bond with New Zealand. But I also think, and maybe this is true for you too, Billy, I think the beauty of New Zealand is when you get a New Zealand freedom fighter, there's just nothing quite like it. They just have a level of resilience. And, you know, Billy is straight out of that stable. He is somebody, he is an absolute thoroughbred. I can't begin to tell you, Billy, how many letters I had from people who watch our program saying, you've got to get Billy Te Kahika on. Am I saying that name correctly? Because I always do it wrong. How do you say it?
Not bad. The pronunciation is Te Kahika, and you're doing very well, John. We can, there's always future lessons we can have. When you come down to fishing in New Zealand, we'll be practicing that on my boat.
Well, exactly. Well, the fishing down in New Zealand is superb. As I think I mentioned, my brother used to have a fishing lodge down there on the Owens River. And now, if I could just ask everybody, just as a point of order, you're about to hear some very important information, not just important for New Zealand, but important for the entire planet, okay? And people are waking up all over the world. All of us here are part of the Great Awakening. As I said to you, all of you, you are remotely granted the Excalibur sword, the sword of Excalibur, which is the sword of truth and accuracy. But the most important thing that you can do right now is press the share button and please create a watch party, because that's the way to get this to lots of people. Somebody turned up here last night. We opened up Camelot Castle again last night. We're now open for business. We're free from lockup or lockdown or lock sideways or the bloody mass brainwashing operation. And the hotel was nearly full last night, so that's fantastic. And I was very, very pleased to note that very few of our guests turned up with these, whatever they call them, the breathing prevention apparatuses, as far as I can work out. So most of our guests were entirely sensible, and we had a lovely evening here last night. And so please do share this, because this is the man. He is the cutting edge of the freedom fighting movement in New Zealand. So I do have a question for you. And by all means, put in the comments if you do have any questions for Billy. What were the principal issues that you saw with the COVID-19 story? What was it that you said, right, you know what, there's something wrong here?
Really, it was around lethality. That was the immediate, I guess, flag that something was wrong here. I looked at different reports from various scientists around the world that were challenging the narrative, and John Ioannidis was probably one of the most prominent of those scientists that came out and said, "Look, this is horribly wrong." Now, Stanford University they're not a bunch of slouches here. These are leading scientists that came out and said, "Look, this is completely wrong. This is not based on proven science and what we know how viruses work and how they function as a virus, and the lethality cannot be proven to be 3 to 6%. So when he spoke up, I certainly listened. But here in New Zealand, we also have our own geniuses that are involved in population health and epidemiology and pandemic crisis situations. And one of them is Professor Simon Thornley from Auckland University. And basically he came out with a bunch of his colleagues and said, look, the government is overreaching on this. We're using a sledgehammer to kill a mosquito. Everybody needs to basically just be careful, wash your hands, don't sneeze and cough on people. Even if we sort of obey those sensible instructions, that we'll be fine, completely fine. And he said when we're at alert level lockdown 4, that we there was no need for any of it. He said at least get us down to 1, and we'll be completely fine with that. But what happened was he was immediately marginalised, he and his colleagues, and they're basically gagged. I actually heard him just by accident on a talkback show as I was driving somewhere for a meeting. And it was the last I heard of him in the media from then on. And then it was basically just a mixture of social media, sort of blogs and things like that coming from Simon. And but in terms of national media coverage, he vanished. There wasn't anything you can find about him, about his views and about it. He was completely gagged. And then what they did is that they called themselves the New Zealand Plan B team, because they were completely ignored by Ashley Bloomfield. He was completely hard invested in the corrupt narrative coming out of the WHO, and there's no surprise in that, John. He is, when you listen to how he was talking in the narrative, it was more about preaching a doctrine than it was about facts, and they were refusing to look at counter arguments, and they were staying with the WHO narrative. So I guess immediately the red flag flew up for me around the lethality and the argument coming from all the very, very credible scientists around the world that said that it wasn't right. So from then you start to break it down into why would certain individuals like Bill Gates want to see this happen? Why would Tony Fauci want to see this happen? Why would all these various companies that are offering to have contracts to develop vaccines, why would they want to do that? So you add the commerciality basis to it all, and there's a strong basis as to why these people want to do these things. But the deeper principle and the deeper issue here is one around population control, population reduction, and basically getting the entire world sitting inside and under the control of the United Nations programs, Agendas 21 and Agenda 2030.
Well, that was actually my next question, because a lot of people on here are familiar with your work. In fact, somebody just posted up that it's thanks to you that they woke up and they've realized what's going on. You've actually got quite a lot of your supporters on here from New Zealand, funnily enough. So it's amazing how a network works. What time is it there in New Zealand at the moment, just to orient people in this country?
Sure, it is 8:52 a.m. on Monday morning.
So you're already Monday, and we're Sunday night here. So that just shows what a huge planet. Although it's not a state secret, I studied with one of the world's great freedom fighters, and I was in LA, and I studied the works of L. Ron Hubbard, who founded Scientology, actually. And I always describe myself as a Christian. I'm an evangelical Christian, Jewish, Muslim Scientologist. And funny enough, L. Ron Hubbard was just getting on the plane, just flying back from Australia, funnily enough, and he turned to the parents of some friends of mine. This was in 1967. And he said, "It's a very small planet for a playful being." And I always remember those words. And I think what is powerful about what your message is, Billy, if you may say, is you've raised the flag for freedom. But as a technical question, and again, I'm going to ask everybody to share this before you answer this question, could you please explain to everybody on here in simple layman terms, principally for me, because I'm a bit of an idiot, what is this UN agenda program, Agenda 21 and 2030, and then how does it affect New Zealand and the rest of the world, of course? What the hell is this Agenda 21? Because I don't understand it.
Okay, well, number one, it's not a conspiracy and it's not a conjecture. So what mainstream media and those who have an interest in supporting these programs, what they do is that they belittle critical thinking, and they belittle the truth, and try and disguise the truth by labeling people that question the narrative, and also the intent of these programs as conspiracy theorists. Well, there's no conspiracy about this. If you go into www.un.org and just look for Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030, you'll see these programs pop up. But what they are, when you actually seek these programs out, you look at them, and you've really got to understand what the terminology that they use means, because they use words like sustainability, okay, which sounds nice. I mean, all of us here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we love our bush, we love our sea, we love our rivers, and most of us, I'd say 99% of us, want to see our environment sustained and nurtured and maintained. That's no problem with that, any of that. That's all good. But when you start to break down these programs, and you really start to drill down into how these programs are implemented, you start to see a level of control like you've never ever seen before. But I would say levels of control that are way beyond, if fully implemented, what we would have seen in Soviet Russia or North Korea. Now let me explain that to you. So Agendas 21 and 2030 were born out of the 1992 Rio Summit that was set up and funded by Maurice Strong, who was an oil billionaire, in conjunction with the United Nations, to basically look at how the global unit could come together to look after resources, maintain climate change sort of protocols emanating out of the Kyoto Protocol and agreements, combining together as a global unit to make sure that our waters are used in the right way, that the seas are protected from pollution. So, huge amounts of environmentalism. But what came out of that was something called the Gaia Hypothesis. And now the Gaia is, of course, is the term that they use to call planet Earth Gaia. And the Gaia Hypothesis is this whole strategy and philosophy around keeping Gaia clean, green, and beautiful. Now that sounds all great. We're all into that. Again, that sounds awesome. But when you drill down into Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030, you start to really see an insidious mechanism of control, where the intent is to put all nations or cities or communities and boroughs into one central unit of control through the United Nations. So that's the first part of it, is that these programs are about combining the global unit into one central funnel of control managed by the United Nations. So keep that in mind. Number two is that this program affects every aspect of what a human being needs to live and survive. So it controls the control of food, how food is produced, where it's produced, and what it's produced with. So if you look at agriculture, if you look at produce, if you grow like I do, I grow my own fruit and vegetables and stuff like that, then what they start to do is they start to close down on what seeds you can use, and are they permitted, are they approved, and they start to control the type of seeds that you use. And of course we have companies, multinational companies like Monsanto already, that are controlling the seed flow and the seed supply into many agricultural sectors.
Sorry, I didn't mean to stop you. I heard that Bill Gates invested in Monsanto. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. He's a big shareholder in Monsanto, and I mean, just on Bill Gates, he's also a major shareholder in a lot of the world's vaccine companies. He funds research institutes like the Purbright Institute in the UK, and he does it all over the world. He just has multiple investment tentacles that sort of spread out across the globe, really, and every sort of thing that you can think of. And he's actually very involved with these types of programs, because at the end of the day, when you examine Bill Gates's history and when you examine these programs, it's all about eugenics. It's population reduction, population control, and eugenics. So just going back, John, so it's about putting the entire globe into the central funnel of control, controlling every aspect of what we need to live. So food, how you grow it, where you grow it, who supplies it, and how much. what you do with your land, what you're allowed to build, what you're allowed to harvest as a hunter-gatherer, your education system as well. They'll control that because they want to indoctrinate your children into their global theology. Also, they want to control health sovereignty and medical sovereignty. And what I mean by that is they basically want to basically push all of humanity into synthetic medical options only, rather than bringing up the natural alternative, well, the natural health options. So what they've done is there, and the UK is a great victim of this, is that they created a multinational committee called Codex Alimentarius. Codex Alimentarius is a group of unelected officials from it's a multinational committee that basically advises and very strongly advises governments about the regulatory process and regulation standards for GMO labeling, food labeling around GMO food, pharmaceutical industry, but also the natural health options as well. So what they've done is that they regulate the potency of supplements and vitamins and alternative options. So the UK is completely subject to Codex Alimentarius. And now when you go into a vitamin store now, once upon a time you go in there and you get a high potency vitamin supplement, but now they've reduced the potency and regulated it down to such a level it's placebo.
Yeah. No, we have to order our vitamins from a special company in America. I mean, there are virtually no vitamin companies in the UK. There may be one that's any good, but we order our vitamins from America, and you take vitamin C over here, it does absolutely bugger all. And the absorption, they're designed, it's almost as if they're designed in a way that the body, you feel no absorption, that you don't feel anywhere. Whereas when I get the ones in from America, they're much better.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, you're completely right. And that's Codex Alimentarius at work, John, and the UK and Europe are heavily subject to that. And it's a mixture of countries involved in it: Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain, of course, and countries in Europe. And they rotate the different functions of the group, so that one year the Canadians might do food labeling, and 1 year the English might do the pharmaceutical industry, and they just rotate them around. And this is what helps to give the power of control back to the UN, because this is a UN partner that's doing this Codex Alimentarius. So it controls the health industry, so that the alternative health industry, so that we all turn to and are controlled by synthetic pharmaceutical companies that only want us to believe that health exists at the end of a needle or the swallowing of a pill. After that, you have military control, because they want to obviously bring all of the nation's armies into an all-bat type situation. That's a military term for an order of control, if you like, or command. And it just goes into the legal framework as well, so that what happens is that the governments no longer have their self-jurisdictional authority. It's handed over to the UN. And the insidious thing about all of this, actually, John, is that at the core of this program is a deeply Luciferian spirituality to it. And I don't say that lightly. I have investigated and researched the UN for many years, and at the heart of it, you have the teachings of Alice Bailey, and who was very intent on ushering a new era of spirituality, using a mechanism like the United Nations to do that. And that mechanism is not based on freedom. I am a Christian, but I absolutely fight and believe that every human being on this planet has the right to believe and the freedom to believe what they will, and that was given by God himself, so that we would decide by our own conscience what we are allowed to believe. And that should be the basis of all democracy stances, I guess, that at the heart of it should always be freedom of conscience. And what this program does, along with everything else, it controls everything. And basically what they want to do through this agenda, John, is they want to basically push all of the world's populations into high-density urban zones, which we call super cities. We've got a super city here in Auckland. They basically want to remove everyone out of the provincial and the rural areas into these high-density population areas and cities, so that they can control us. They basically want to repurpose all of the farming and agriculture land. So that's why they want to destroy the agriculture sector around the world, and New Zealand's a big part of that. and so that they can destroy the agricultural sector, and then they reinstall their own puppets into the agricultural sector so that they can control the flow of food and how it's done and that. And then they repurpose the land, they make them exclusive to human zones called special designated areas or special sustainable designated areas. They're human exclusive zones. You're not allowed to go in there unless you have a permit and approval to do that. Now, for us Kiwis, that's like that's the ultimate sort of anti-Kiwi antithesis, I guess, of how we live in New Zealand, because we go to the beach all the time, we go in the bush, we go into our forests, and we love it. That's a big part of it. We have outdoors, we have hunting. It's a big part of our culture here in New Zealand and Aotearoa.
So important to be connected to nature. Now, I just there's a June Oataroa who has just posted up here, and I think she's posted up the link for your freedom movement in New Zealand. Oh. www.nzpp.org New Zealand. I assume that's your new political party. Please, could everybody on here join this? Somebody else said, I wish we had somebody like this in Belinda Compton says, I wish we had somebody like Billy in Australia. Too many sheep still asleep. Well, of course, there are a lot of sheep in Australia. We've got them here too. Not as many as Australia, probably. But the people here are also like sheep. I'm sure that's who she's referring to over there. Let me tell you how you wake people up. You share this message. You get Billy's message. And then what you do is you find Billy's official website, which somebody can perhaps put in the comments section here, which may be that link that I just said, and go on there and study what this man has been revealing to his nation. Now, one of the things I heard about down there, Billy, is that some of the legislation that has been passed by your prime minister there is literally draconian. I mean, they can actually now just go into your home and take your kids. Is that an exaggeration, or is that true?
That's absolutely true. So just before I go there with you, so Jacinda Ardern stood on a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation event staged last August in New York at an event called Goalkeepers, and she announced to the entire media and all the people there that she would lead New Zealand ahead of any other country on the planet to fully implement Agenda 2030 in our country, which is the complete destruction of democracy as we know it. And this threat is global. This is why this narrative, this is why this crisis is happening, because it's the exact crisis and that they needed to be able to close the world down and introduce these programs. And what they've done here in New Zealand, they very, very stealthily and deceitfully brought in what is called now as the COVID-19 Health Response Bill. This bill was introduced without the regular democratic scrutiny and process of select committee oversight, opposition, discussion and debate. They just threw it on the table on the day that they were going to read it, asking the opposition MPs to have a look through it, which nobody does. And in fact, when you look at how the United States were bringing in laws that restrict freedoms in the US, they did it exactly the same way. They would read or submit the documents in their house at 2 a.m. or on the day, so that the proper scrutiny couldn't be applied to these new bills and laws that they wanted to read in. So what they did here, while everyone is in lockdown, they introduced the COVID-19 Health Response Bill, because what happened was, for the first 2 weeks that we locked down, they were arresting people and detaining them and prosecuting them without the legal framework to do it. So they were illegally, without basis, arresting New Zealand citizens for violating the social distancing and lockdown edict. Now, these aren't laws, these are edicts. These are declarations that rely on the compliance of the citizenry, but they were arresting individuals. And then what happened was Crown Law, which is essentially the government's legal team, advised them that they had no legal basis for which to do this type of activity and operations. So they tried to hide that information from New Zealanders, but it was leaked. So there are some very, very brave people in government that have been leaking documents out, which I've got to say, I don't know who they are. We receive information quietly as well, and it gets released. So it became big news in the New Zealand media. Why was this government first of all, acting without legal basis to arrest people. And then, of course, they introduced the COVID-19 Health Response Bill. And this bill is like nothing New Zealand has ever seen. Not even during wartime did we have anything like this. So just very quickly to explain it to you. So what it's broken down into, I guess, a couple of different pieces. Number one, they can, if they suspect that John is in his home at Camelot Castle, that you may have been exposed to the COVID-19 virus, and if they ask you to come in for an examination and you don't, then what they'll do is the Ministry of Health, not the police, will authorize designated people or authorized officers. These are not policemen, these are just individuals with their clipboard and high vis vests, to come into your house with police without warrant, to arrest you, detain you and your family, and take you away and perform a medical examination / procedure on you. And now semantics are important here, but they're not important in one aspect, because I had someone say to me, Billy, you said that this is a medical procedure. It's actually a medical examination. Well, that's semantics, because when you have a 6-inch COVID-19 test swab pushed up the nasal passage so far back that it goes into the back of your throat, and to swab and test you, I would say that without doubt that's a medical procedure. And this lady tried to tear me apart, saying that, no, sorry, mate, you're completely wrong. That's a medical examination. Well, I'm sorry. In my book, and I've been medically trained as a first responder, that's a medical procedure. Whichever way you want to turn that around is up to you, but that's what it is. And so anyway, what it came down to is that they've authorized these non-police personnel to be able to come in without warrant onto your land. It's very cunning how it's written, actually, because they can come onto your land, they can come into your workspace, they can basically get you in your driveway, and they can arrest you and take you away. But then it's broken down into a police constable being able to enter your dwelling house or our cultural centre, which is called a marae, without a warrant, and come in and take you out of your home and take you away and perform a medical examination and a procedure if required. And this is, you could be, absolutely refusing this, but there's no recourse for you, so they'll just do it. So the interesting thing about this is that when a constable enforces COVID-19 health response bill and takes you out of your home without warrant, they don't necessarily report to up the rank structure within the police system. They've actually got to submit a report back to the Ministry of Health, which is very, very disturbing when you have a health organisation or a health agency of the Crown making enforcement decisions and having enforcement jurisdiction like this. But it gets worse here in New Zealand, because a couple of weeks ago, then they announced that they were going to hand the authority of managing this type of protocol of the COVID-19 health response bill. They were going to hand over the jurisdiction and management of it to a military commander. Now, John, in my experience of armed forces law and military law, and I did a tour of duty with the Trentham Military Police Unit in Wellington, where I studied some of this law. This is going back 18 years ago, of course, but when I studied it, it made it very, very clear to me at the time that in times of warfare, in times of civil distress, when a military commander is given authority to enforce any type of law on civilian population, that's martial law, that's military law. And what they've done is now she has, pardon me, I say she, I mean our Prime Minister and her government has given authority for the enforcement of this protocol around quarantine and enforcement of COVID-19 health response bill to a military commander. And this is the first time within New Zealand history that we've had anything like that, where a military commander has been tasked to enforce civilian law on a domestic population like this. And that's of deep, deep concern to me. So you can start to see when they add things like the internet filtering bill, which is about to go into law this week, potentially in New Zealand, where they will filter what you say online, and by their definition, if they object to it, they'll be able to remove you as a dissident, as per their terms of reference to the dissension and objectionable parameters that they set for the internet filtering bill. But it gets worse again. They're now trying to introduce 15 new bills in what they call 17 hours. So the joke of it is, amongst the political parliamentary scene, is that they announced they would want to read 50 new bills into law in 17 hours. But one of them, the bills that they were tinkering with, which has me deeply concerned, is the New Zealand Bill of Rights, which, as you would know, John, is based on the Magna Carta and human rights, and they're tinkering with that now. We don't know what they're doing with it, and it has me very, very concerned, because what they're trying to do is set up a legal framework which they can impose eventually Agenda 2030 on us all without recourse, and that's got to be stood up against.
Well, I am literally sitting here, I'm watching the comments, and I just want to thank, we've got another 300 people have joined the feed, and this is just on one platform. Of course, this is going to go out on all platforms. We'll end up probably with between 100, 200,000 people seeing this tonight worldwide. What I would like all of you to do is share this, and I will tell you why. As I mentioned earlier in the program, please don't take this the wrong way. I started studying Scientology about 30 years ago, and the reason I did is because I realized that it augmented my Christianity, and it's a study in freedom. Now, the only reason I mention this, I could care less what religion anybody is that's watching this. We respect all people's religions, but let me tell you a story about Scientology. When the powers that be wanted to try to take Scientology down worldwide, where do you think they tested the mechanisms in order to suppress Scientology? They tested it in Australia and in New Zealand. And that's where, because they couldn't squash it in America and in England, but they chose this sort of little backwater, because from the viewpoint of, let's say, America and England, New Zealand, I know it's not a backwater for you, but we view that somewhat as a little, it's on the underside of the world. You're all walking upside down there. So what they did is they tried test cases in Australia and in New Zealand, where Scientology was tiny over there. I mean, it was probably only a handful of Scientologists down there. You know, it was quite popular down there because it's quite a sort of a freedom-loving community. But basically, they tried the test cases. And the reason I wanted to speak to you, and the reason I was so keen for you to come on, was because I saw how the deep state tried to attack Scientology in New Zealand, and that was going to be their blueprint for the rest of the world. So what's happening in New Zealand now, and these draconian measures, if you're sitting there in Texas or you're sitting there in California, or I mean, where, I'd be very interested to know, everybody on the feed, where are you from? Put in where you're from. We'll say a few prayers for you as we see your place come up. You know, here's the point. What we're witnessing in New Zealand is a microcosm of the macrocosm. That's their plan for us, right? I'm supposed to be going out fishing in Iceland later, and I've just been told I don't go into Iceland without having a test. I don't want to have a blood test, right? But if I want to go fishing, I've got to have a test. So the point is that they are this draconian legislation. And, you know, the fact of the matter is, there's been a very interesting court case in New Zealand that I've been following. Some of you may have been following it too, with this guy, Kim.com. And, he's a controversial character. And, the deep state from America was trying to basically extradite him from New Zealand. So I followed the case very closely because he did a very good job of exposing some of the corruption of John Key, if you remember. Right. And, that was another period of corruption. My point is that New Zealand politically, and I don't know if this is the impression I got, it's a bit of an old boys club, and it's now been tied into the deep state. This woman who's in charge there now is part of the club. She's part of the deep state club, and New Zealand is being used as a test thing. And of course, from the point of view of the MSM, of course, they're saying, oh, this woman's done a marvelous job. She's done a marvelous job. But actually what she's done is she's created, a situation where this legislation has been put through. And I think all of us, and I would ask everybody on here, could be the most important interview that we have ever done at Camelot Castle TV network, because what you're witnessing here is a man whose country's freedoms have been taken away. Period. No question. And by the way, New Zealanders are among the most freedom-loving people in the world. You would have thought this is the last place that you know, would have their freedoms assaulted. So I can tell you that with my experience of freedom fighting, and with my experience of that, the way that they use New Zealand is as a test bed in order to suppress man's sovereign impulse. So everybody needs to pay attention here, and, you know, by all means, research what was done to L. Ron Hubbard and what was done to Scientology in New Zealand. They tried to squash it out of existence. They failed utterly, of course, but you know, we as a group had to take some very, very strong measures. So listen, you've got a lot of people watching you here now. What can we do to help you, and what is your plan, Billy? What is your plan? How do we, you know, it's a terrible, terrible, terrible situation, but what can be done about it? Because something can be done about it.
Absolutely. And just a couple of points too that you just raised, it, which are really important, is that yes, Kim.com did suffer the brunt of political anger and wrath when he exposed some of the things that John Key was up to. And I'm going to try and reach out to Kim, because I think he's got some really good information that we need to know about. I certainly supported his stance against when you have deep state people, you know, using a sledgehammer on a private citizen to to basically silence him. Yeah.
Let me stop you there. I would actually like, I'm hoping, I sent this tip because Kim.com and I have been in communication. Okay. And in fact, he invited me down to New Zealand to come and meet him. And frankly, it's something that's on my I've been very interested to do that, but we've been so busy with the presidential races in America, and we just haven't gotten around to do that. But what I would like to do is I would like us to deliver a message to Kim.com. So I'm just going to ask you a question. Billy, do you have a message for Kim.com?
Yeah, sure. Reach out to me, Kim. I'd like to connect with you and have a bit of a huddle with you to kind of get inside your experiences, what you've gone through in your plight to stay free, and also the type of experience that you had in terms of being persecuted for your stance, and especially exposing information which exposed what's going on in the deep state. I mean, in one of his political broadcasts, you know, he spoke out quite clearly in support of Julian Assange, and he got belittled for that, you know, and it just goes on and on. So I'd like to connect with him, because, you know, like minds should come together to look at how we defeat, you know, tyranny like this. And that's what we need. That's why I say in my broadcast, John, that we need to, regardless of religion, regardless of race, creed, whatever, we need to actually come together as a family unit to defeat this tyranny. And if we don't do it, then we're going to wake up to a world where we're going to be radiated by 5G unobtrusively. We're going to be poisoned with GMO food that we've got no choice to eat. We're going to lose our freedoms to educate our kids the way that we want to do, what we do with our land. All of these things are deeply serious and they're deeply real. And what I would respectfully say to the people that aren't aware of this is look past the rhetoric and go into hard study on these things and of the agendas, because the agendas 21 and 2030, they use really pretty words like social justice, social equity, but that's another word for socialism and communism to collapse everybody down into a have and have not situation. Everyone, most of the herd, or using communist Marxist language, the proletariat everyone gets crushed down to the bottom. There's a hierarchy up the top, which they never mention. And of course, those people making the laws in the deep state are in the hierarchy. And then, of course, all of us are in the herd. And in terms of your reference around Jacinda Ardern's history, I mean, she is absolutely completely groomed for the role that she's fulfilling today. You know, she started out as a political assistant to our very own Helen Clark, who became number 3 in the United Nations organization. And Helen Clark is literally the globalist. She is essentially the matriarch of the entire system. Jacinda started there, was an intern there, I guess, learning the ropes about things. From there, she goes to work for your very own Tony Blair, who, of course, is very, very questionable, and now, of course, believe it or not, the UN Ambassador of Peace. From there, she comes back to New Zealand, becomes an MP, and then becomes a 2009 elect president of the International Youth Socialist Organization, which is the incubator ground, the incubator of all tyrannical socialist Marxists, on the way to becoming fully blown communists. And then when you look in this chain of evidences and players and actors, who does she know? Well, of course, she knows she's good friends with Bill and Melinda Gates. She's good friends with Bill and Hillary Clinton. She gave over $7 million of our taxpayer money to the Clinton Foundation last year. Now, why did she do this when the Clinton Foundation is dealing with an assortment of litigation from the US Justice Department for corrupt behavior with this foundation, being involved in releasing information, brokering uranium deals, things like this? Why are we giving our taxpayer money to the Clinton Foundation when we have our own people living on the streets in Auckland and old people that need wheelchairs that can't get them? Why are we doing this? It's because she's got this deep friendship with them. And it just goes on the list of contacts that she has, and she is working to a script, and she's obviously been the former president of the International Youth Socialist Organization. That is a special United Nations NGO group, and she was the president of that. And of course, with that type of indoctrination and doctrine and ideology that she has, of course, she's going to be complicit and a total believer in Agenda 2030 without doubt. And she is on time, on script to try and bring these things into us in New Zealand. And you're dead right, John. What is happening here or trying to be implemented is exactly what they want to do to roadmap the entire world into this plan. Now, one of the things that people also don't realize about these agendas is that, yes, there's socialism, yes, it involves communism, but there's the other part of it that has the strength of fascism in it, because they need major corporates to be able to partner with, to multinational corporates to control the flow of food, money, you name it. So they actually need the complicity of free market players from the right, because they provide the strength of the corporate power to be able to enforce these things. And as you know, fascism is, in verity, is partnership between state and corporate organizations to control populations and control all aspects of society. So what we have here, John, is this movement that I found myself at the front of very reluctantly. We've blown all the records in New Zealand political history for the setup of a new party. We're only 3 weeks old. We're almost at 3,000 members, which has never been done before for any party in New Zealand. It's incredible. To give you some context, here in New Zealand, you need about 550 registered members to be a recognised party. Normally that can take weeks, months, if not years to do that. We did it in 2.5 days. In fact, we had 700 people in two and a bit days. 3 weeks later, we're just under 3,000. We'll hit that in the next couple of days. We've had over 1 million engagements in the message that I'm sharing. And our goal is very, very simple, is that we want to get into Parliament, represent the people of New Zealand, and bring back the sovereignty and the integrity into our system that right now is very well set up to answer to foreign international programs such as UN Agendas 21 and 2030. And we want to basically get in there and protect our citizenry and bring integrity and people control of the government, not control of the government of the people. That's the wrong way around, and we recognize that. And we've got some amazing people coming in behind this movement. The people themselves have said to me, Billy, just keep speaking, we'll push you into Parliament. And that's what's happening. And one of the saddest things that I'm seeing here, John, is that there are minor political parties that are absolutely blown away with this comet that is streaked across the political realm here in New Zealand. And rather than seeing us as something that will help them go into Parliament to affect change, they're actually looking at us as some type of threat to pride and 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 their own personal goals. I've never wanted to be a parliamentarian, never wanted to be a politician. But God has a funny way of giving you stuff that you don't want, to say that He can use you to do things.
Sorry,
and,
that
yeah.
If you just go back a minute, because you cut out.
Sure. Oh,
just
sorry.
Go back a minute.
Okay. No, I was
the
just saying that. Oh, sorry about that. What I was just saying is that, you know, we're very one in intent, and that's to get into Parliament, to bring back integrity, and to bring back the power to the people to run our country, because at the moment it's all about international agreements. It's about the United Nations, and it's about following a corrupt international script that New Zealand doesn't want. And New Zealand citizens have said to me they'll push me into Parliament. All I need to do is just keep speaking, and in that process try and unite the minor parties into this massive umbrella organisation that we've created called the New Zealand Public Party. And our slogan is very simple. I say it every day. This New Zealand Public Party is your voice. Why? Because we say the things that no one else is saying. You know, people, I'm very surprised, John, that I'm not, you know, people don't sort of have a go at what I'm saying. They tend to try and, you know, do character assassination and discrediting, but they don't actually argue with what I'm saying. So people know that what I'm saying is bang on, and it's accurate, it's factual. And so I consider that this New Zealand Public Party is the voice of the people, because we say what needs to be said. It's the power of the people, because they have put me here to lead this movement, and it's their party because they wanted it. And it's evident because of the huge growth that we're going through. And so my role over the next week or so is to complete hopefully the merger with ourselves with another minor party, so that we will actually end up being a major party without doubt. And that is absolutely free.
You will, and I think you will become a major party. If not, you probably already are, because I think the grassroots support that you're getting here now. We are joined tonight on the feed, and you wouldn't necessarily know these people, but I'm just going to flag them up to you. Amanda Eliash, who is the founder of the Eliash multi-billion-dollar head fortune, and she is a great freedom fighter and a huge philanthropist, and she was one of the great supporters of President Trump in London and in Los Angeles and Paris. And she has her own group and a number of other people. One of the interesting things about Camelot Castle TV network is that we've been broadcasting virtually every night during lockdown, and we have gathered here together some of the great freedom fighters. And what I'd like to do, with your permission, is connect you up to some of the real great minds. For instance, in the anti-vaccination movement, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny has been amazing. There's some guys in America that are very, very high up. I don't know if it was mentioned to you, but we have raised over $30 million for conservative movements in the USA. And one of our very good friends is Charlie Kirk, who founded Turning Point USA. And so a lot of people watching here tonight are supporters of Turning Point. And there's a huge number of freedom fighters. We have people here. I myself, as I've said, am an evangelical Christian, Jewish, Muslim. Listen, I love it all. Any truth I love. And, you know, I love Jesus. And, you know, I think there's tremendous power in the power of prayer. One of the questions I'm personally interested to know about you, just because I'm curious, are you part Maori, or are you just not Maori? I mean, I don't know what they call that in New Zealand.
No, I can.
Maori in you?
No, I hear the question. No, I'm definitely Maori, and my surname Te Kahika is a very, very old Maori name. It's a Polynesian name. So so actually it means, and I feel a bit sheepish and shy saying it, but Te Kahika means the expression of a warrior. And I never, my family are peaceful warriors. I've been a soldier, of course, and it's the other side of it. But my dad is a peace ambassador around peace and love for all humans. And so Te Kahika means that. It's a very old Māori name. But my mum is of French, Irish, and Scottish descent. I'm very proud of that as well. So I'm what's called, we call people like me a fruit salad. And we have all these sweet and juicy bits that come together to make us what we are. And feel very blessed to have that, because it's given me from a race and ethnic point of view, it's given me a very, very broad and I think a very clear understanding of the different issues affecting different races or ethnic groups in the world. When I was very young, I stayed with African American family in Mississippi because I'm a musician, and I've toured all around the world and met people and stayed with all sorts of indigenous people, meeting the Samis of Scandinavia, Celts, and it's given me a sort of personal racial makeup that allows me to have great empathy and great familyhood with people of all diverse races, and I really celebrate that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funnily enough, I used to live in Hollywood, and Lee Tamahori, who made the film Once We Were Warriors, became a very close friend. And of course, he's a great sort of New Zealand talent.
Sure.
How have the Maori Party, how have they digested what you're doing? Because I seem to recall that the Maori Party teamed up with the Internet Party that Kim.com got going. How is there a chance of an alliance there, or how have they digested what you're doing so far? Because I always felt that a Maori leader, I think it's time for New Zealand to have a Maori prime minister. I really do think that New Zealand is ready for that.
So do I. I completely agree with that. That the party that actually partnered with Kim.com was the Mana Party. So that is another Maori-led political party. But I think what you asked there is a very, very good question, John, because one of the things that absolutely astounds me is how silent on these issues the Maori leadership are, and Maori Party falls into that category. They are completely asleep at the wheel as to the great threat that we are facing right now and dealing with. I'm trying to reach out to some of their leaders at the moment so I can talk to them. My family was very involved in the Maori Party. One of my aunties is very involved with it still. And but the thing is, I say about them and other minor parties is that they actually major on the minor issues, and that's not sufficient, and that's not what is required right now. What is required is that we protect democracy, bring back integrity, and protect our economy, and fix it with real economic and business expertise to get us out of the hole. But none of the parties are talking about it. They're talking about things like outdoors. Well, if they bring an Agenda 2030, there is no outdoors. Because they'll control all of it. They will restrict human access to our beautiful forests and the beautiful bush that we have here. Monetary reform, well, that's an important topic as well, but it's not the most important right now, because if we lose our rights and our freedoms, monetary reform will never be dealt with. Conservatism in the way that one of the parties talks about here is not important right now, because again, if we don't stand for those very basic sovereign and rights and freedoms issues, if we don't stand for those, then we're gonna lose everything, and nothing else matters after that.
Well, I think you're right. I think New Zealand's future is sitting on a knife edge, and I do believe that it's the pilot, it's the test for the rest of the world. So if we allow New Zealand to fall, and if we as freedom fighters do not, I mean, we're lucky for the moment. We've got President Trump in America. I don't know if you saw the last two speeches he gave. He gave a speech in front of the monuments, which was very special. And then yesterday he gave another speech, which I may actually screen later on the channel tonight, because for those of you that missed it, but so powerful. And I because we've been involved so closely with Charlie Kirk and Turning Point, what is going on in the schools there? Are your children being indoctrinated and brainwashed and basically lied to, as ours are? Because over here, our children are being taught to hate their country, they're being taught to disrespect their parents, and they are being fed absolute bollocks on the subject of the biological nature of man, and what's going on over there?
Well, absolutely the same thing. Absolutely the same thing. So the Green Party, which was meant to be about rights and freedoms here in New Zealand, protecting our environment, brought in the anti-smacking bill in the early 2000s, around about 2006 or 7, I think it was, around about 2007. They brought in what's called the anti-smacking bill here. And so essentially what that did was it turned a whole bunch of loving parents like me into criminals if you give your child a paddywhack on the back of the bum. And the basis for that was that they were trying to prevent children getting murdered by their parents and stepfathers. Well, but the absurdity of that is that this law was never going to be about stopping those people, because if you've got people that have got a propensity to kill a child out of rage, no law is going to stop them from doing that. You know, it's actually about recognizing those symptoms within their household and getting those kids out of there and protecting the mother if she needs to get out of it. But what they did is they created a dragnet law, which basically, turns, loving parents that care about their children and don't want to see them grow up wayward into criminals for giving them a paddywhack. That was just really the beginning of it. And then, of course, they took corporal punishment out of schools, and that, of course, allowed kids to do whatever they like, and it just goes on and on. But you're dead right around the education agenda that we are facing, and that again is also a part of the United Nations agenda, what they call the rights of the children. And by giving children these rights, they completely undermine and take away the rights of the parents to be parents. And I'm a big believer in biblical principles and how I raise my children. My children are my children. I'm responsible for them to God. And so the way that I look at it, no state has the right to interfere. That's overreach again. But what they're doing with it, and this is why in the UK they try and get kids so very, very early, is that they're indoctrinating them that they're not from their town, they're not from their city, they're not from their country, they are global citizens. So they start to destroy nationalism. Now, nationalism in its proper place is a wonderful thing. We celebrate our culture, we celebrate our geography, the things that make us unique and special. They're wonderful celebratory things to do, but not so under Agenda 2030, because they want to destroy all of that so they can homogenize us and control us as one central global unit. So destroy nationalism, destroy the family unit, and that's what we've seen. Now, don't get me wrong, I love everyone. I've got gay friends and all that I care very deeply for, and I protect them from any type of attack. I don't support their lifestyle in that way, but I support them as fellow humans, and I care very deeply for them.
Right, that's their human right.
That's right. But what we're seeing here though is they're using that as the agenda to destroy the family unit, because they know that if you can destroy the family unit, you can destroy the community, you can destroy the country, and then you've got your homogenization very, very easily, and that's the whole basis of it. So we're seeing exactly that. They're dumbing our kids down. No longer is critical thinking taught, or thinking for yourself is taught to kids. They're basically handed a very, very slim box of choices. Pick one, and all those options are bad, because they don't actually develop the intellect and develop the natural inherent interests of the child. They make everyone the same, and that's not right. And we've seen that here, and that's part of the entire agenda of that the United Nations has. And my whole thing is really is that regardless of what anyone believes or whatever they are, whether from a religious point of view, sexual persuasion, or that, none of that matters right now, because I believe, just like me as a heterosexual male, that we all have the right to live the life that we want to live. And that's the central issue here. It's not about whether I want to impose my beliefs on someone else. That's not right either. It's actually about everyone living the way that they choose. We all are accountable to God one day for our lives, how we lived it. But that's not up to me, Billy, the guy, looking at John and saying, sorry, mate, I don't agree with how you live. I'm going to put a gun to your head unless you do things my way. And that's what we stand against. And that's what real democracy and freedom is. Absolutely.
It's freedom of choice. It's personal sovereignty. And there is a battle for sovereignty, personal sovereignty, family sovereignty, group sovereignty, and national sovereignty. And this is where the rubber meets the road. It's interesting you say that. Now, in America, what we've been noticing is that President Trump has been arresting a number of people that are at the heart of the various different pedophile networks. And what we've noticed and what we've discovered in our journey here at Camelot Castle TV is that blackmail obtained by the likes of Jeffrey Epstein and people like that is being used to control these politicians. Now, what I want to give a big shout out to is the whistleblowers, because without these whistleblowers, okay, and what I would have thought is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if there are people in New Zealand that have information about corruption, and in particular the paedophile networks and so on and so forth, this is information that you need to make known. Do you feel that this is a problem in New Zealand, where with the sort of the blackmailing or the control of politicians there, or do you think that's something that is you've been saved from so far?
No, I think that's definitely a part of it. I mean, look, what goes on behind the scenes and under the blankets in private rooms, we can only speculate about. But no doubt, these where you get complicity to the level that that we're seeing with these global scripts, there has to be something in it for somewhere in for these people that are for it. I mean, for me, my gut feeling is that Jacinda Ardern has probably got a nice, cozy job as the future Secretary General of the United Nations. Helen Clark tried to do the same thing but didn't get voted in. She got to number 3 in the entire structure, which is very, very simple, very senior to get to. But I think if Jacinda plays the script as she is, she'll probably get to that number 1 position very, very easily. So I think there's a different TV channel for everyone that they offer of that has some sort of benefit or some sadistic, kinky bloomin' thrill that they get out of it. But in terms of children here in New Zealand, we are deeply concerned that we've had 1,000 children go missing in state care, and they can't find them. We don't know where they are, and we want to investigate that as soon as possible and find out what's happening. I'm not saying that all these kids have been hijacked, kidnapped, and all that, but we want to know exactly where these kids have gone, if they've escaped from state custody or from foster homes and that. Well, that's fine, but we need to find out where they are, and that's something that's been spoken about under people's breaths because they don't want to confront it. But we know, that a number of kids have gone missing under state care, and we need to find out where they are and what's happened to them.
If anybody out there has any information about those kids or why those 1,000 children have gone missing, what should they just get in touch with your organization and get the data to you? Probably a good idea. Now, somebody just asked the question, John Mappin, please ask Billy about the new abortion laws. Is it true that babies can be aborted at full term, and why is that?
Okay, so I knew about that bill. I've known about it for quite some time. I knew that it was coming, and again, they got it into law during the lockdown. When they were meant to have closed Parliament down during this crisis, they were actually passing laws, skipping the democratic process. The abortion law, when I had a good read of it a few weeks ago, really broke my heart, John. I read it. I'm a daddy of six beautiful children. I've got 2 beautiful little girls that are my grandchildren, and I love children, always have.
You don't look old enough to be a grandfather.
I know. Thank you very much. I started young, you see. So
well done.
My eldest daughter's 27, believe it or not. I'm 47. So and when I read it, it actually blew my mind and really broke my heart. And there are some myths that aren't quite accurate about the bill, but let's actually talk about what the bill is. So number 1, the previous law enabled a lady to have a woman to have an abortion up to 12 weeks of since the gestation or the conception of the baby. You were allowed to have an abortion at 12 weeks with obviously the sign off of an approved medical professional, i.e. a doctor. And then after that, if a woman's life was threatened or that there was some major medical and health mishap, then they would look at it under extreme urgency whether an abortion needed to be carried out. But what this law here does, and it's heartbreaking, is that they've then extended that 12 weeks out to 20 weeks, which is quite a lot longer, as you can imagine. It's 2 months longer. So this is a fully breathing, functioning baby. This is not a teeny weeny tiny polka dot bikini fetus, which it basically is in its first couple of weeks. This is a fully formed baby at 20 weeks. They can terminate that baby at that point, and then after 20 weeks, it takes the sign off of 2 doctors or medical professionals to give the approval for a much later termination of that baby. I don't think it goes quite to full term, but it's pretty high. But this is where it gets really sinister in my view, is that if a baby isn't successfully aborted and that baby is born and needs some medical help, they don't have to give that baby medical assistance and can let it die. Now that's murder. That is, why don't they adopt their baby to a family that would love to have a baby, or a couple that can't have children, and make our adoption laws supportive of helping people that are proven to be safe parents take these children and look after them and love them and raise them up, because there are actually adults in New Zealand right now that are against this law, that are adults that when they were conceived were attempted to be aborted, and now they're walking around and they're against this law. So for me to read that they can allow a little baby to be born and not administer medical help and assistance to let it die, that's the epitome of evil. So what we have here in New Zealand, we actually have a government of death. We really do. We have a government of death, and they're willing to do that to these beautiful babies. In fact, it really upsets me when I think about it, John. It really, really does. It's
heartbreaking. I mean, somebody says here
it truly is.
was rushed through while you were in lockdown.
Yeah,
that's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yep.
Unbelievable. But what I'm trying to get over to everybody here, and the reason I want everybody here, share this broadcast, create watch parties. You would be amazed. Somebody turned up here last night at Camelot. I had never met them. They said a friend of mine's friend did a watch party. So it was like 2 watch parties away, and we heard about your TV channel, and we came in, and they booked in the first night we were open at Camelot Castle. So it is so important. And she said, I can't believe what I've learned. And it's so important that you network with each other. For those of you that are on the feed, if you want to put your links in the feed, if you feel that there's information that needs, this internet, by the way, that's the bolt from the blue that they cannot fight against. Now, they can suppress our feeds. They do. I am shadow banned on Twitter. I have hundreds of thousands of followers, and I'm lucky if anybody sees my tweets. They squash me down. But you know what? There's new platforms opening up. We're always on the new platforms. You're probably on Parler as well. Everybody here should get onto Parler. Use Twitter. Use social media. I cannot begin to tell you. And that's one of the things that Kim.com actually is quite a genius with, is social media and how to really leverage the internet. Now, how about funding? Do you need funding? Do you have sufficient funding? If people want to donate to you, at the end of the day, any movement like what Billy is trying to do needs money. Okay. And if you want to fight for freedom, basically it's going to cost money. Now, some people are shy on asking for money. I'm not shy. Basically, if anybody out there would like to help, how can they do that, Billy? And what are your sort of, how can they be in touch with you and donate and so on and so forth?
Thank you, John. And some of those connections that you're talking about with major funds would be a great help.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm learning to get over my shyness around this topic, because basically when this movement started 9 weeks ago, I was completely unprepared for it. It's taken my wife and I every little bit of spare money that we have to put into this. All of the team and I are doing it without salaries and wages. I haven't worked properly for about eight weeks now. and I've lucky I've got some really understanding people that I work with from a work point of view, because they haven't totally chucked me out with the bathwater. But we were very unprepared financially for this, and it's been a great shock. We've been funding ourselves. We do have something called koha, which is our Māori word for, little small donations and things like that, and they actually help to pay for the events that we're having, because we're having massive events. Our events are gigantic, overflowing, jam-packed. They're amazing every time, and that costs money to do that. So we've been taking some of the little donations.
Marissa Pirol, who's a great philanthropist, she says, let's donate. And somebody else here says, please leave a link where we can donate. Somebody else says, if you're doing it for New Zealand, I will donate.
Oh, well, thank you.
It's not just for New Zealand, by the way. Peter Majak says, if you're doing it for the betterment of New Zealand, I will donate. So the fact of the matter is, it's not just for New Zealand. As I've told you, when Scientology was attacked on this planet, totally unfairly, the place they targeted that attack was New Zealand and Australia, right? And they used that as a test. They used it as a test. This is what we're witnessing in New Zealand. If New Zealand falls, all of you people that think, oh, I'm all right, Jack, I'm in Switzerland, we've got people from Switzerland, Belgium here. By the way, this is the test bed. Billy's campaign is the tip of the spear. And by the way, somebody's just said Billy could be New Zealand's Donald Trump. He doesn't have the hair. He doesn't have, and he's different to Donald Trump. Donald Trump was right for America and is right for America in our view. Okay. Billy is a Maori. He's a man of the people. He loves his country. He's a deeply, deeply Christian soul. He is a man of prayer. He's a man of faith. And I believe, and I'm going to say this, he's the man of the moment for New Zealand. That's what New Zealand needs right now. Okay. So please, could somebody put up a link where we can donate to your program? Because there are people here. And what I've learned that, about money is if you flow it towards goodness, you get goodness back.
That's right.
That's not to say you put all your money to Billy. No, but you can put a bit and make a flow and just see how your luck improves. We say push power to power, push power to power, move the power around. It's a flow, and just make a little flow. And even if it's $1, you know what? Even if it's $1, even if it's $half, make a flow, because it's a jolly, jolly good thing to do. So Billy, somebody says Billy's going to drain the swamp. Are you going to drain the swamp?
That's exactly my intent and goal. There's nothing secret about that. I've been saying it from day one. I call our parliament a zoo, and it needs to be cleaned out.
Well, I have been aware of the corruption in New Zealand politics since I saw, listen, I don't think Kim.com is perfect by a long shot. And if you're watching, Kim, sorry, I don't think you're perfect by a long shot, right? But you know what? There's no way he deserved the bollocks that he experienced in the court system there and the level of corruption. And he did New Zealand a huge, huge favor. Huge, huge favor. And the fact of the matter is, when you get this endemic corruption in any political system, it has to be cleaned out. You have to clean the zoo, as you say. You've got to clean the zoo. Is there any message, final message, Billy's final thought to the people of New Zealand and to the people of the world? What is your message to the people of the world?
Thank you, John. Well, number one, this is really the hour for all of humanity to come together to defeat this. There is an agenda to crush out the light of freedom. We need to stand together. We need to, regardless of, like I keep saying, regardless of persuasion, ethnicity, race, religion, or creed, we need to stand together, link arms, and tell the very few that us, the many, aren't going to stand for what they want to do to destroy our freedoms and our democracy. In New Zealand, what is happening here is a roadmap indicator to what they want to do to the globe, to you, wherever you are on the planet. It doesn't matter where you are. If you're in the Middle East, if you're in Europe, if you're in the States, 100%. South America, it doesn't matter. This is a global agenda. It's one that's serious, and it's one that will affect you, your children, and their children and their grandchildren. And if we don't stand now, then we will be condemned. We will be condemned in a number of ways. Number one, when they look in the future and look back at us, they'll say, what the hell did they not do? Why didn't they do this? This is the window of time that we have now to do this. And we've got an opportunity to do this together. In New Zealand, we are right at the front of this. And as our Prime Minister has said, she wants to fully indoctrinate our culture and implement Agenda 2030 on us all regardless. She's made that commitment publicly, stated it. Now she's following a script, using this COVID-19 health scandemic is the very mechanism that she needed, and that the global leaders needed to bring this global agenda in. But we don't have to stand for it. We don't have to stand for it. We can work together to do this. I want to also ask the other minor parties of New Zealand, come under this major umbrella that people are getting behind. Don't worry about your little couple of percent. Come and bring it over, and let's go in there together as a unit and defeat this and bring in proper change. To all our international friends out there, please, if you have people like me standing up and speaking, please support them. We need it. Protect their characters, protect their hearts, protect their families, and protect them and give them platforms to speak for you, because it's a major, major decision to come out like this. My life will never be the same. Whatever happens from here on in, my life will never be the same after this. And I'm aware of it. It's life-changing. It's scary, but it's rewarding for me, and please help those people. I do want to say that if anyone wants to email me, please email me at billy@ibc.net.nz. I'll say that again. That's Billy, B-I-L-L-Y, at ibc.net.nz if you'd like to donate, because what we're waiting for is so another convenient thing for the government, we're waiting for our merchant number to come through so we can receive donations, but I can receive donations and then they're logged in our party book. So I can receive them and they get logged and we declare them. So if you want to email me, I'm happy to supply my details so that you can donate, and every little penny would help us because we desperately need it. Thank you very much. And John, to you, God bless you and your family and back in England there, and I hope one day that you and I will shake hands as we step on a boat to go fishing together, brother.
I'm sure we will. I'm sure we will. Well, the fishing in New Zealand is nothing better than that. Nothing better. I would like everybody on here, and we have people here from Israel. We have people here from the Middle East. We have people here from all different faiths. And there's one thing that every single faith has in common. We all believe that if we pray together and we ask God for a more positive future, let's put it that way, good can come of that. And some of us have the courage to stand up and speak, and Billy does have the courage. And some of us, we just about got the courage to press the share button, which I hope all of you have done. But it's too much to do a watch party though. But tonight, do the watch party as well. My point is that Billy needs our prayers. He actually, and I don't want to be, he's putting his life on the line here. He is actually risking his life going up against the level of evil that he is going up against on this planet. So please pray for Billy and for his family and for his beautiful 6 children and for his team and for the team of freedom fighters that he's gathering around him, because nothing can get in the way of the will of God and the power of prayer. It is so important. And when we all pray together, and if we all just put our attention onto New Zealand, and if we all just bless this incredible man and hand the glory of what is occurring here to God, then I am absolutely certain that that those prayers will be well received. So it's been an absolute honor, Billy, to have you here with us. I will get your message to kim.com. We will put this up on YouTube, and we're going to tweet it out. And everybody here, if you don't have a Twitter account, make one, get one. They're a great campaigning tool. Get yourself active on social media. And, you know, if we can reach hundreds of millions of people. By the way, I'm going to let everybody in on a competition. We're doing a competition during lockdown, and we started doing this broadcast. Guess how many people we reached over lockdown. We broadcasted every night, and there's going to be a prize from Camelot Castle, which we're going to draw next week, to anybody that guesses the right figure as to how many people saw this broadcast during lockdown. And I'll give you a clue. It's in the millions. It's in the millions. So please, if you put your number in the comments with your name and where you're from and how many people you think we reached during lockdown, and while you're doing that, say a prayer for Billy, because this is a great man. He's going to go a long way. And we look forward to welcoming you if you do come out to England. Well, you will when you're Prime Minister of New Zealand. Welcoming you to Camelot Castle.
I so look forward to that, John. I really do. And I grew up with the Arthur chronicles and stories and that. It'd be lovely to come through and to meet you and to share some time with you. And I just had someone say to me, could you please put my email address somewhere so that people can see it? So thank you to everyone. I want to wish everyone God bless and take care. And I look forward to hopefully meeting you all at some stage out there. Thank you so much. We will we'll sign off now, and I will give you a little later, Billy, and we'll follow up. Thank you, brother. Take care. Thank you. Bye.